Welcome to Saturday morning, November the 14th, Fireside Chat. As America remains undecided, yet the press claims they know, without the courts deciding and the Electoral College voting. We've already discussed in previous blogs that that is a legal impossibility, and whichever one of them may win, until these matters are settled, we don't know yet. And we have to, or the Americans have to ensure that the voting occurred properly. But it speaks to a much larger issue, and I'm interested in the larger issues because I am not loyal to anything but ideas, great ideas, the ideas that made Western liberal democracy possible, which features as a key principle within it limited constitutional government, separation of powers between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, the rule of law, and a constitution which limits the government. I've recently purchased Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, and it's a fascinating read. And here's one of the things that de Tocqueville observed while traveling through the America of the 1830s, and that it's an important period of time that I wish to discuss this morning because it deals with the Great Awakening and how the ideas that became prominent after the Age of Enlightenment in America helped form her mojo, the overvaunting ideas that drove America forward. This is what de Tocqueville observed. Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness did I understand the secrets of her genius and power. America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. All throughout history, and this is why history repeats itself, competing paradigms that explain the world in radically different ways have not been able to peacefully coexist. And in the rejection of the grand narrative that made America possible and made the Western world possible, of which perhaps America is representative in terms of its belief in individual liberty and accountability, that paradigm, that belief system, is the system that buttressed the government because it placed maximum responsibility on a law that was blind to your own personal identity and would treat all equally before the law. When that paradigm is lost, as in the past, it has been replaced with an idea that group identity is more important than that of the individual, which of course is the underpinning ideology, the underpinning thought underneath all socialistic forms of government, whether it's national socialism, international socialism, neo-Marxism, postmodernism, all of these things place emphasis on you belonging to an intersexual group, and that group defines who you are. You're no longer you. The two competing paradigms cannot possibly coexist. So what would need to be established would be to look at both paradigms and to have an honest discussion of the historical impact that they've had on mankind. Did they result in law, order, peace, and good governance? Or did they result in greater inequity and murderous turmoil. And of course, it doesn't take a deep dive into looking into the history of all forms of social collectivism, with its rejection of the grand narrative and the belief that man had to become his own god, and therefore create the Übermensch, that created unholy, murderous, collective hellholes. And if you're looking for inequality of distribution, never has there been greater inequality in any society other than in a collectivist one, where the socialist oligarchs, the elite that run that system, become the wealthiest and most powerful people in the system that demand absolute and total compliance to their idiom and paradigm. This is exactly what we're seeing today. When people want to have an intelligent and open discussion, as we see now with this election in the States, they're being silenced. The mainstream media has become nothing but a tool of that silencing, and nothing but a tool which propagates the state's position, the position of the wealthy elite within the state, I should say. And what small part of that state wishes to place individuals back into focus, you can see the absolute war that's being waged by the elite, particularly those that manage social media in this post-information age. These people have enormous wealth and power, and they're literally controlling what people are able to think and say. Now, of course, someone like myself wonders why or how it's possible that people could be so easily deceived, but in an age of 10-second sound bites and simplistic memes on both sides of this discussion, I can see that if you don't wish to think very deeply, that you would be easily influenced by either argument. And that brings us full circle, of course, back to the original premise, that the individual must be accountable and think for themselves, and must be willing to do a deep dive into the very nature of what has gone wrong. And in that deep dive, I have come to a very sad conclusion. You see, it was during the Great Awakening that Tocqueville toured America. Even within the broader confines of Christianity, the different paradigms within that system of thinking couldn't happily coincide. During the Great Awakening, there was a greater emphasis on individual salvation and a need to have a personal relationship with God without having priests or ministers, ordained or otherwise, stand between God and man. That Christ alone was the mediator. This was the overwhelming ideology that made America possible. For some reason, peculiar as it seems, the church that was responsible for propagating this vision has utterly failed. The major evangelical denominations have harbored a bunch of blowhard soapbox televangelist types, many of whom were as crooked as a dog's hind leg, and no one seemed to notice. Of course, I did, but few Christians seemed to speak out against it and recognize that it was there, that each Christian is individually responsible for everything that happens. I'm not just responsible for myself. And this is where this ultimate conclusion of individual accountability leads me to say, when things are going wrong, it's up to me to address the issue and to speak about it. We can only do that when there's open discourse. And we can only do that when the church is fulfilling her position to represent Christ and Him crucified and resurrected in a fallen world. I want you to pray about that. Think about it. Because there is only one way out. Christ is coming for those who love His appearing. And the only place we'll ever see Him appearing, likely, unless by some miracle His return is imminent, the only place we'll see Him appearing is in one another. God bless you. Pray, think about where we're at and what we can do to get ourselves out of it.